The rain hammered against the windows of the Meridian Tech building in downtown Seattle that Tuesday evening, creating rivers that raced down the glass like tears on a giant's face. Marcus Chen pulled his mop bucket through the executive floor hallway, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished marble that reflected the city lights below. He had been cleaning this building for 7 years, always starting at 6 in the evening when most of the office workers had already rushed home to their families, their dinner tables, their lives that seemed so different from his own. Marcus was 43 years old, with streaks of silver running through his black hair like memories of better times, and hands that knew the weight of both textbooks and cleaning supplies. Most people who passed him in the halls never looked at him directly, their eyes sliding over him like he was just another piece of furniture, another fixture in the building that kept things running but didn't require acknowledgement. He didn't mind the invisibility anymore because it had become a kind of shelter, a place where he could exist without questions, without the need to explain how someone like him had ended up here, pushing a mop instead of pushing boundaries in boardrooms. That particular evening was different though, because the CEO, William Harrison, was still in his office at 8:30, which was unusual even for him. Marcus could see him through the glass walls, hunched over his laptop with his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand running through his graying hair in obvious frustration. Marcus had learned to read the body language of the executives over the years, the way they carried their stress in their shoulders, their victories in their stride, their defeats in the slump of their backs. Harrison was dealing with something big tonight, something that had him pacing back and forth like a caged lion, occasionally stopping to stare at the rain-soaked city below. Marcus continued his work, methodically cleaning the conference room next to Harrison's office, when suddenly he heard a voice speaking in rapid Japanese coming from the speakerphone. The words were sharp, angry, and Marcus could tell immediately that something had gone very wrong with whatever deal Harrison had been working on. Through the glass, he watched as Harrison fumbled with papers, clearly lost and overwhelmed, unable to understand what the person on the other end was saying. The CEO's translator had apparently left for the day, and now he was stranded in a conversation that could make or break something important. Without really thinking about it, Marcus found himself walking closer to the office door, his cleaning supplies forgotten. The Japanese voice continued its tirade, and Marcus could understand every word. The person was upset about a contract clause, something about delivery dates and penalty fees that hadn't been properly communicated. It was a misunderstanding, but a costly one if not resolved quickly. Marcus stood there for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest as he wrestled with the decision. He had kept his abilities hidden for so long, built walls around his past life, but watching Harrison's desperation through the glass made something shift inside him. He knocked gently on the door, and Harrison looked up with irritation that quickly turned to confusion when he saw the janitor standing there. Marcus spoke softly but clearly, "Mr. Harrison, I couldn't help but overhear. The gentleman is upset about Article 7 in your contract. He says the delivery timeline you promised is impossible given the current shipping restrictions from Osaka." Harrison's mouth fell open, his eyes widening as if he had just witnessed a magic trick. "You speak Japanese?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded, then added, "If you'd like, I can help translate. He's saying he wants to cancel the entire deal unless you can guarantee delivery by the 15th of next month." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus stood in that office, translating back and forth between Harrison and the Japanese executive, not just converting words but smoothing over cultural misunderstandings, explaining context, and even adding small touches of politeness that he knew would resonate with Japanese business culture. By the end of the call, not only was the deal saved, but the Japanese executive seemed genuinely pleased, even laughing at one point when Marcus made a subtle joke in Japanese about the Seattle rain being nothing compared to Tokyo's typhoon season. When the call ended, Harrison sat back in his chair, staring at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. 7 years, sir," Marcus replied, already starting to back toward the door, suddenly aware of what he had just revealed. But Harrison stood up, walking around his desk with an energy that hadn't been there before. 7 years, and you speak fluent Japanese? What else do you speak?" Marcus hesitated, then quietly listed them: Mandarin, Spanish, French, Russian, Arabic, Portuguese, and Hindi. Plus English, of course. Harrison's expression shifted from surprise to something deeper, almost like recognition of a massive oversight. 9 languages, he said slowly, as if tasting the words. You speak 9 languages, and you're cleaning my office. The next morning arrived gray and misty, with the kind of Pacific Northwest drizzle that made everything feel soft and uncertain. Marcus arrived at work at his usual time, expecting things to return to normal, hoping that perhaps Harrison had forgotten about the previous evening or decided to let it pass without comment. But as soon as he entered the building, Rosa, the head of custodial services, intercepted him with a strange expression on her face. "Mr. Harrison wants to see you," she said, her voice carrying a mix of curiosity and concern. "Top floor, his office, right now." Marcus felt his stomach tighten as he rode the elevator up, watching the numbers climb while his mind raced through possibilities. Had he overstepped? Was he about to be fired for interrupting an executive meeting? The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Harrison's assistant, a young woman named Jennifer whom Marcus had cleaned around hundreds of times but never actually spoken to, smiled at him warmly. "He's expecting you," she said, gesturing toward the office. Inside, Harrison was standing by the window, but this time he wasn't alone. There were 3 other people in suits, members of the board from what Marcus could tell, and they all turned to look at him as he entered. "Marcus," Harrison began, his voice carrying an authority that filled the room, "I did some research last night. You have a PhD in comparative literature from Columbia University. You taught at 3 different universities before coming to Seattle. You've published papers on linguistic anthropology and cultural communication. What I want to know is why someone with your qualifications is mopping floors in my building." The question hung in the air like smoke, heavy and impossible to wave away. Marcus felt the weight of 7 years pressing on his shoulders, all the reasons he had hidden himself, all the pain that had driven him into invisibility. He took a breath, then began to speak. "My wife, Lily, got sick 8 years ago. Brain cancer. The treatments weren't covered by our insurance, and even with my professor's salary, we couldn't keep up with the bills. I took extra jobs, sold our house, emptied our savings, but it wasn't enough. She died anyway, after 14 months of fighting. I lost everything trying to save her, including my will to stand in front of a classroom and talk about the beauty of language when all I could think about was the last word she said to me." His voice caught slightly, but he continued. "The university couldn't hold my position while I dealt with everything. I had debts that felt like mountains, and a daughter, Sophie, who needed stability more than she needed a father chasing academic dreams. This job paid regularly, had benefits, and let me be home when she needed me. So I took it, and I stayed." The room was silent for a long moment, the only sound the gentle patter of rain against the windows. One of the board members, an older woman with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, spoke first. "Mr. Chen, would you be willing to help us with a situation? We have a critical meeting this afternoon with potential investors from 6 different countries. Our usual translation team is stuck in London due to flight cancellations. We need someone who can navigate not just languages but cultural nuances." Marcus looked around the room, at these people who had never noticed him before, who had walked past him 1,000 times without seeing him. Part of him wanted to say no, to return to his mop and bucket, to the safety of invisibility. But another part, a part that had been sleeping for 7 years, stirred to life. "I can help," he said simply. The meeting that afternoon was held in the main boardroom, a space Marcus had cleaned countless times but never seen in use. Now it was filled with investors from Brazil, Russia, Saudi Arabia, France, Japan, and India. Marcus stood at Harrison's right hand, shifting seamlessly between languages, not just translating but interpreting, explaining cultural contexts, catching subtle meanings that would have been lost in basic translation. When the Saudi investor made a comment in Arabic to his colleague, assuming no one would understand, Marcus quietly informed Harrison that they were concerned about the company's environmental policies. This allowed Harrison to address the concern directly, impressing the Saudis with both his awareness and his respect for their perspectives. During a break in the meeting, the French investor approached Marcus directly, speaking in rapid French about his surprise at finding such linguistic talent in an American company. Marcus responded fluently, making a subtle joke about how Americans always surprise people by being more than they appear, which made the investor laugh and pat him on the shoulder with genuine warmth. By the end of the 3-hour meeting, deals worth $40 million had been secured, and every investor left with a positive impression that went beyond just business. As they were leaving, the Indian investor stopped and spoke to Harrison in English, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "This man," he said, pointing to Marcus, "is worth more than any technology you're selling. Languages are bridges, and he builds them better than anyone I've met." After everyone had gone, Harrison asked Marcus to stay behind. The boardroom felt enormous with just the two of them in it, the late afternoon sun finally breaking through the clouds and casting long shadows across the polished table. "I want to offer you a position," Harrison said. "Director of International Relations. The salary would be 3 times what you're making now, with full benefits, stock options, and flexible hours so you can be there for your daughter." Marcus stared at the offer, feeling the weight of it, the way it could change everything. But also feeling the fear, the vulnerability of stepping back into a world that had hurt him so deeply before. "Can I think about it?" he asked. Harrison nodded. "Take the weekend." "But Marcus, I need you to know something. In my 20 years running this company, I've made a lot of mistakes. But the biggest one might have been walking past you every day without seeing what was right in front of me. That changes now, whether you take this job or not." Marcus left the building that evening feeling like he was walking through a dream. He picked up Sophie from her after-school program, and as they drove home, she chattered about her day, her upcoming science project, her best friend's birthday party. He listened to her mix of English and Mandarin, the way she switched between languages without thinking, a gift he had given her without realizing its value. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Marcus sat in his small apartment looking at old photos of Lily, remembering how she used to laugh at his ability to order food in any restaurant in any country, how she called him her universal translator, how she believed he would change the world with his gift for connection. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear, one of those rare Seattle days when Mount Rainier stood like a guardian in the distance, visible and magnificent. Marcus arrived at the building wearing his custodial uniform, but carrying something else too, a small box containing the few academic awards he had kept, his published papers, and a photo of Lily and Sophie. He went straight to Harrison's office, where the CEO was already waiting, nursing a cup of coffee and looking out at the mountain. "I'll take the position," Marcus said, "but I have conditions." Harrison turned, eyebrows raised. "I want to create a program for other employees, custodial staff, security, food service, anyone who might have hidden talents or education but got stuck in positions below their capability. I want to help them find paths forward, the way you're helping me." Harrison smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face. "Done. What else?" Marcus set the box on the desk. "I want to keep my old uniform. To remember where I came from, and to never look past anyone the way people looked past me." Harrison extended his hand. "Welcome to the leadership team, Director Chen." The announcement of Marcus's promotion sent ripples through the entire company. Some people were inspired, seeing it as proof that the company valued talent wherever it came from. Others were skeptical, wondering if it was just a publicity stunt or if Marcus was truly qualified for such a position. The whispers followed him through the halls, but now he walked those halls differently, with his head up, meeting people's eyes. His first week in the new position was overwhelming. He had an office on the 15th floor with a view of Elliott Bay, an assistant named David who was eager and efficient, and a calendar already packed with meetings. But the hardest moment came when he had to walk past the custodial break room where his former colleagues were having lunch. He stopped, knocked, and entered. The conversation died immediately, everyone staring at him in his new suit, the distance between them suddenly visible and painful. Rosa was the first to speak. Forgot about us already, Professor. There was hurt in her voice, mixed with something else, maybe pride, maybe resentment. Marcus sat down at the familiar table, the one with the wobbly leg that he had always meant to fix. I could never forget, he said, speaking in Spanish because he knew Rosa preferred it. You all kept me standing when I couldn't stand on my own. This position, this chance, it's not just for me. He explained his program idea, how he wanted to create opportunities for advancement, education assistance, language training, anything that could help people move up if they wanted to. But also, he added, looking around the room, there's dignity in every job. I'm not saying anyone needs to change. I'm saying everyone deserves the choice. Slowly, the tension eased. Tommy, the night security guard, admitted he had an engineering degree from the Philippines that wasn't recognized here. Maria from food service revealed she had been a nurse in Honduras. One by one, stories emerged of talents buried under circumstances, dreams deferred by necessity. Within a month, Marcus had convinced Harrison and the board to fund the Hidden Talents Initiative, a program that would identify and develop internal talent across all departments. The first success story was Tommy, who moved into a junior engineering position after Marcus helped him get his credentials evaluated and recognized. The program grew beyond just Meridian Tech. Other companies began reaching out, wanting to understand how to identify and elevate overlooked talent in their own organizations. Marcus was invited to speak at conferences, sharing his story and the stories of others who had been invisible in plain sight. But he always returned to his office, to the photo of Lily and Sophie on his desk, to the custodial uniform hanging in his closet as a reminder. 6 months into his new role, Marcus was handling a critical negotiation with a Chinese tech giant that could transform Meridian's presence in Asia. The meetings were intense, requiring not just language skills but deep cultural understanding, the ability to read between lines, to understand what wasn't being said as much as what was. On the final day of negotiations, the lead Chinese executive, Mr. Wang, asked to speak with Marcus privately. In Mandarin, he said, I researched you, Mr. Chen. I know about your wife, your struggle, your time as a janitor. In China, we have a saying, gold will shine wherever it is placed. But I think the American saying is better, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Except in your case, you were never trash. You were always treasure. They just needed the right eyes to see it. The deal was signed that afternoon, valued at $200 million over 5 years. Harrison pulled Marcus aside afterward, his face showing a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. You know what the real value of that deal is? He asked. Marcus shook his head. It's not the money, Harrison continued. It's the proof that when we stop overlooking people, when we really see them, we don't just change their lives. We transform our entire world. That evening, Marcus picked up Sophie from school as always. She was 15 now, tall and graceful like her mother, with the same warm laugh that could fill a room. As they drove home, she asked, Dad, why didn't you tell anyone about what you could do? All those languages, all that knowledge. Marcus thought for a moment, watching the Seattle skyline fade in the rearview mirror. Sometimes, Sophie, we get so used to being invisible that we forget we deserve to be seen. And sometimes it takes someone else believing in us before we can believe in ourselves again. Sophie was quiet for a moment, then said, I'm proud of you, Dad. Mom would be too. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes, but he smiled. She always said my languages would open doors. I just didn't know they would open them for others too. A year later, at Meridian Tech's annual gathering, Marcus stood before an audience of 3,000 employees. Behind him on the screen was a number, 47. That was how many employees had been promoted through the Hidden Talents Initiative, how many invisible people had been seen, how many stories had been rewritten. Every person in this room, Marcus said, his voice carrying across the convention center, has a story. Some of you are living it proudly, openly. Others are hiding it, maybe out of pain, maybe out of fear, maybe because life pushed you into a corner and you decided it was safer to stay there. But I'm here to tell you that it's never too late to step into the light. It's never too late to be seen. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces, seeing the custodial staff he had invited sitting in the front row, seeing Rosa dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, seeing Tommy in his engineering polo shirt, seeing all the people who had been invisible now shining. A year ago, the CEO heard a janitor speak 9 languages, and what he did next didn't just leave the office stunned. It started a revolution of recognition. But the real story isn't about me. It's about what happens when we stop walking past each other, when we stop assuming someone's worth based on their uniform or their title, when we actually take the time to see who's been there all along. The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. But Marcus wasn't finished. So I challenge each of you, look around. Who are you not seeing? Who have you walked past 100 times without really looking? Because I guarantee you, there's someone in your orbit with a gift, a talent, a story that could change everything, if only you'd stop long enough to notice. As Marcus stepped down from the podium, he thought about Lily, about how she always said his gift wasn't just the languages he spoke, but his ability to help people understand each other. He thought about Sophie, who was now applying to colleges, writing in her essays about how her father taught her that dignity isn't determined by what job you do, but by how you do it. He thought about all the janitors, security guards, food service workers, and maintenance staff in buildings around the world, carrying their secret degrees, their hidden talents, their untold stories, waiting for someone to see them. The CEO hearing the janitor speak 9 languages had indeed left the whole office stunned, but the real shock wasn't the languages themselves. It was the realization of how much talent, how much potential, how much human brilliance they had been stepping over every single day. Because sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones we've trained ourselves not to see, and sometimes all it takes to change everything is someone finally looking, really looking, and saying, I see you. You matter. And you belong here. That evening, as Marcus left the building, he stopped by the custodial closet on the ground floor. It still smelled the same, like industrial cleanser and tired dreams. He touched the door frame gently, like visiting an old friend. Roberto, the new night janitor, was just starting his shift. He looked up at Marcus in his expensive suit, probably wondering what an executive was doing in his space. You speak any languages, Roberto? Marcus asked in Spanish. Roberto's eyes widened slightly. Just Spanish and English, sir. But my daughter, she speaks 4. Marcus smiled. Tell me about her. And as Roberto began to talk, his face lighting up with pride, Marcus made a mental note to have HR send Roberto information about the company's education assistance program. Because the revolution of recognition hadn't ended with his story. It had just begun. And some you were pushing their mops, carrying their secrets, waiting for their moment to be seen. The difference now was that people were starting to look. Years from now, business schools would teach the case study of Meridian Tech, not about the technology they developed or the deals they closed, but about the day a CEO heard a janitor speak 9 languages and chose to see what had always been there. They would talk about the Hidden Talents initiative that spread to companies across the globe, about the thousands of overlooked employees who were finally recognized, about the fundamental shift in how we value human potential. But for Marcus, standing in that custodial closet talking to Roberto, it was simpler than that. It was about remembering that everyone has a story worth hearing, a talent worth discovering, a light worth seeing. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply pay attention to the people you've been taught to ignore. Because when the CEO heard the janitor speak 9 languages, what he did next didn't just leave the whole office stunned. It reminded the world that extraordinary is everywhere, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to look past the uniform and see the human being wearing it.